Hello, everyone. Savage Brewski here. Welcome back to the Savage Brewski podcast. If you're new, this is a podcast for the tabletop gamer and hobbyist. I talk everything from crafting, playing, advice, hacks, reviews, anything related to tabletop gaming. Very happy you could join me today. So today's topic comes from a friend of mine. His name is JP Got Rockets. Spelling is in the info or the comments below. And JP can be found many places on the interwebs. He's on Twitch, YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook. I believe he's on Rumble. I could be totally wrong here. But basically, he does a lot in the way of miniature painting. He does mostly live streaming. Works a lot with a little indie studio called Sea Dog Studios, I believe it is. They do Tech Commander, among other things. It's basically a combined arms Battletech-like game with a lot more customization from what I see. And his question basically was, how do I grow my local hobby culture? And essentially that's just expanding who you're gaming with, who you're playing with. Where do you find the people? How do you organize? And I've gotten that question many times, to be honest, because it seems like we gamers have a couple of things going where there's these ideas floating around that we've all kind of gone into agreement with. Like, it's hard to find players. It's hard to find other people to take up the hobby with. And I'm just going to tell you right up front, these are lies. It's not hard. It's like getting any other activity going. Somehow people start community groups and they organize locally or online, and somehow they manage to get traction. You know, a Discord goes from a couple people to hundreds. Your followings on socials. Maybe you started out small with 100 or 2 and then you're over 1,500 before you know it. It happens. It's a thing. So obviously the idea that you can't find gamers, you can't find players, there's something incorrect there. And I'm going to try and break down what that is, how you outcreate that, how you go around that, and how you actually do get yourself a group of gamers. Because it can definitely be done. It's not as hard as you might think. Okay. So first big lie, first big myth, gamers are scarce. No, we absolutely are not. I'm gonna break this down in a couple different ways, but first off, whether you know it or not, and maybe you just haven't looked lately, you are surrounded by nerds. I love nerds, okay? We're literate, we're creative, we're interested, we ask the big questions, we check things out, we support each other. Nerds are awesome. If you don't have nerds in your life, 1, you absolutely do. You just don't know it. 2, get some nerds in your life. Recognize them, applaud them, laud them. You will thank me later. Okay. What do I mean by nerds? Well, people who are into sci-fi, fantasy, whether that's books or games or movies, TV. Games also includes video games. Writing, artists, they're creatives, they're painters, they're sculptors, they're drawers. You have people around you that are into all of these things and that do all of these things, I'm sure. Case in point, just make it really simple. When is the last time you ran into someone that was a fan of Lord of the Rings? Movies or book, I don't really care which. You can strike up a conversation with them pretty easily. Or someone who's into other literature you like. I was a big fan of Ender's Game in my teens. And I read all the other books. I read the Enderverse. I read The Shadows. Obviously, the first and second Formic Wars. Orson Scott Card wrote those later on. But I've basically been there for the whole thing. And I run into somebody that knows Ender, and I have no trouble whatsoever, talking to them for a half hour to an hour. And just going back and forth on various things. You're surrounded by these people. You just don't know it yet. Where do you find them? I don't know if you've noticed, but since the pandemic, especially book clubs have made a resurgence, whether they're little groups on a social like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, Discord, in person. Maybe you have like a community center or a Y or just a library group or something like that. Maybe you meet up at a Barnes and Noble once in a month. I mean, these things are all over the place. And especially if it's, fantasy oriented or, science fiction oriented, you're dealing with people that very easily accept the concept of other worlds, other realities, other situations. And it's not too much of a stretch to invite them to bring that onto a table and experience it, visually, physically. Okay, good. That's no longer, in D&D, the phrase theater of the mind is used a lot. If you don't know what that is, theater of the mind literally means you're sitting there, the game master, dungeon master is painting the picture of what you're seeing and what you're hearing and where you are and what you're surrounded by. And everything is literally done just verbally. You don't necessarily have it physically in front of you represented by models and mock-ups and maps and things. You just, you walk down a corridor and you see a dim light at the end. You hear what sounds like a bunch of snakes. Okay, good. That's theater of the mind, just if you don't know. These guys really would not have a problem if you presented them an opportunity to play a game. I'll get more into that a little bit later, but let's just start with that. Book clubs for one. Two, video gamers. Obviously, you meet people you play with online in games or that you watch similar content with or that you directly, maybe it's someone you literally know and you just play the same game together. Okay. Again, it's no stretch at all to take World of Warcraft and put it on a table, or Baldur's Gate and put it on a table, or Diablo and put it on a table, or for that matter, StarCraft, Warcraft, Dawn of War, even Fleet games, Squadron 42, Star Trek. These all translate into tabletop one way or another. The games do exist. They are out there. So again, video games are a big draw. Movies and shows, super easy. I mean, Lord of the Rings literally has had games on the tabletop for ages. Dungeons and Dragons was a game before it was a movie, but some people saw the movie and got into the game, or watched Stranger Things and got into the game because of that. Every single season has D&D lore or a game being played, pretty much. Fairly simple there. Especially when you get into other franchises, like people who are into Marvel, they had Crisis Protocol. Star Trek, Star Wars, again, you get these big, fantastical settings of battles, and you're a shoe-in for wargaming right away. It's, you go see a movie and someone's, oh yeah, I love that movie. Okay, cool. How'd you like to play it? What? Get them, catch them with their jaw hanging down. Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah, you like the Battle of Hoth? Okay, good. We're gonna build Hoth. White table sheet, bunch of hills, couple walkers, couple miniatures, turrets, etc., etc. That's really easy to build, actually. Anyway, more on that part later. I'm getting too off topic of where you find these people and more the fun you can have with them. So I think you see where I'm going with this. You would be surprised probably that there's random people you hang around with that are already playing things. You guys, most of you know my story. I moved to the Sacramento area about a year and a half ago, and I was surprised to find in my church there's a group of 4 or 5 guys that all play Magic the Gathering, and they just, I wear gamer t-shirts all the time. So one time they saw one that was, I think it literally was Dungeons and Dragons theme, and they said, "You're into gaming?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." Blah blah blah. Magic, Magic. You play Magic the Gathering? Yeah. Oh my God! Instant invite. Gone over there once. I'm not on the best schedule for it right now, but I've got an invite whenever I want it. And these guys play, at least 2 or 3 Saturdays every month, and that's when they're not doing a pre-release or something like that. So you'd never know who you're already around. You just kind of have to bring it up somehow. So it definitely is worth your while to just ask and say, well, anybody a gamer here? Anybody do this? Anybody play that? Okay. So you get the idea. There really is no shortage of people that you can get around to. And it's really easy, just as a point of inviting them to experience a game. Really, really not hard. And you just kind of have to get over that analysis paralysis or the overthink of, well, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? Are they going to want to play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Cool. Don't worry about that yet. First, just find people because they're there. You just have to find them. I guarantee it. Unless you literally live in a small town and then you're more stuck doing this online, but that's probably easier. It's already easy to find people around you, then it's probably going to be a million times easier to go online and find a Facebook group or a Discord or a YouTube channel or a Twitch streamer or someone that has something going that you can be a part of. It really is that simple. I'm not exaggerating that. I don't mean to make light of anyone who's having a hard time. I want to help you guys. But you just have to realize that it actually can be simple. And maybe just changing your mind to that degree that you can do it is the first big step you need to take, and just say, you know what? Screw it. I can do this. I can find people to game with. That kind of is a thing. That is a block. If you've already decided there is no one around you, if you've decided it's all pointless, you're never going to get people into gaming, well, that's going to be your experience. I'm sorry to say. You're not going to do it. So if that is your mindset right now, please change your mind. You absolutely can do that. Okay. I'm going to get into, I should really call this the third big lie. The second big lie probably was, the fact you can't change something. But next big lie, it's them, not you. Okay. A couple people pointed this out to me when I floated the topic. And there's a few things that you can do when you're trying to organize a group, or things you might have done with a group in the past that can absolutely shoot down any and all attempts to get gaming going again. Okay. One of my newer acquaintances named Andy, very, very delightful lady, gave me basically the man in the mirror question. And what I mean by that is, okay, did you have a group of friends and you literally took delight in playing the game master and you killed them all off and you bragged about it? Or did you invite people to play a game with you, and then instead of actually showing them the ropes, did you really just delight in taking them out and getting their gear or something like that? I'll give you examples. Okay. I had a friend in high school. I'm not going to name him, but this guy, the only problem with him, like, he was into a lot of really cool games as they came out, but he would basically take them up like a fad and just kind of lose interest a couple months later. And, so we did Wolfenstein Enemy Territory on PC. And 3 or 4 months later, he wasn't into that. He was into Diablo 2. And so we all got Diablo 2. And then he was going around and made a point to duel with us and steal all our gear. And he was playing an assassin. They had the expansion out at that point. And he would play an assassin and just quickly duel us and beat us and get our gold and get our gear. And that was pretty much the end of that. We just wouldn't play that game with him anymore. And then he got into like Dragon Ball Z, the card game. Credit where credit's due. He got a lot of us into Warhammer. But, that was kind of his thing. He wasn't really there and in it to win it. And after a while, we just didn't want to hang out with him because it was like, he would play the game, but it was kind of like he was just there to do something socially. He really didn't care about us. He wasn't trying to, really be a friend to us. It just kind of got dumb. So it's worth asking. And if the answer is no, you didn't do that, you don't have that kind of history, totally fine. I'm not here to, put anyone on a pedestal as being the perfect gamer. I'm not here to tear anyone down as being, you're terrible. The point is, just take a look and see, like, did you play Dungeon Master and did you, like, run Tomb of Horrors? It's a module that is all puzzle. Virtually every room has something designed to kill you. It's not very monster heavy, but it's one of those classic old modules that people rightfully respect and fear, and that you wouldn't just toss a new player right into. Did you, was that your excitement? Are you like, yeah, I love killing off player characters? Like, yeah, no. You have to ask that question. You have to see, is there something you did to alienate the people around you that were gaming? Just take a look. The other thing is, especially when this really applies to any activity, it's not just gaming. But if you're going to get something going in your area, if you're going to get something started, to some degree, you have to be wearing the pantaloons and you have to organize things so that people can walk in and game. Okay. When you're talking about tabletop, at a bare minimum, that means people need to kind of understand a rule set. They need to have access to that rule set. They're going to need dice. They're going to need to know they're sitting down for 3 or 4 hours at a pop. And they're going to have someone one way or the other that can walk them through rules, can walk them through games. Okay? If you get into wargaming, that's a little bit more complicated because now you need a space. You really need a board and terrain and miniatures and the rules and dice and measuring and all that other stuff. Sometimes, templates and other things. But that might mean, you can't just do it at home. You might, maybe you're younger and your parents really don't like you having people over for that long or taking up their antique dining table. I thought I was kind of lucky growing up because my parents, loved my friends. I had good choice of friends. I didn't bring over anyone that was rowdy or a druggie or anything like that. They were all, very, very constructive guys, very easy to get along with. My parents were always happy to, help me host and would, oh, cool, you're having friends over. Oh, good. We'll get pizza and wings. Here you go. That's kind of how that went. Yeah, absolutely use the dining room table. It's big enough. Here you go. Blah. Maybe you're not that lucky and totally understood. So you have to go to a game store. You have to go to a community center or somewhere you have a big enough space and enough things, and you have to have the miniatures and you have to have the terrain. That's an investment. And you have to realize that if you're trying to get somebody into Warhammer and you don't have those things, or you're trying to get someone into Battletech or even Dungeons and Dragons and you don't have the rules, you don't have the character sheets, you don't have spare dice, you don't have miniatures, you don't have any of those things otherwise that you need, it's a bit of a stretch to say, hey, come check this out with me. Because you just have to realize that these guys are walking into something totally unknown. So to a degree, it's, do you have the things you need? Further, do you know the game? Because your friend doesn't. The guys you just recruited to sit down and game out with you don't. They don't have your experience. They don't have your knowledge. Maybe they have some idea in the back of their head of how, a dungeon crawl should work conceptually, but they don't know the mechanics of the game. They don't have dice. They don't have characters. They've never done this. So you have to be taking a bit of charge and you have to be taking a bit of care of these guys. And they're going to rely on you to know rules. You're going to have to know pretty easily what they need to roll or what, know their stat sheet. I brought it up. Someone had asked, how hard is it to get into certain games? And we were talking about Call of Cthulhu. I like the game. I have basically 2 gripes with it. And one of them is just that the character sheet has something like 50 or 60 different skill traits. And it's just kind of a word. And you have to know what they encompass or what they include, and not to mention where they are on the sheet. It's a bit daunting to find sometimes. I believe it's mostly alphabetical, but at the same time, it's like, what is that under? If you misname something, you can be looking around for a couple minutes kind of confused. So you need to know character sheets. You need to know the record keeping, especially when you get into wargaming and things with multiple units, multiple rules for each unit or model. Then you want to think with all the various capabilities, and you have to be willing to step in and go, oh, wait, this dude actually can move faster. He doesn't move like the rest of your army does, or he shoots differently, or blah. You kind of have to have that knowledge over the other players so you can show them until they do get the ropes and they do get the hang of things. So it's also a matter really of, caretaking and to some degree, yes, babysitting. And you have to be willing to do that. So I've basically gone over where to find these guys and some of the things you need to look at that might be preventing you from getting people around you. Now, let's look on the plus, because you have a lot of resources out there. And these days, between the internet, between indie games, and various things you can find online, it really is a lot easier to get people into gaming and to find the things you need to do that. Okay? So, just prefacing, I'm not really nitpicking between roleplay games and wargaming. And that is going to be a little bit of a future topic. Someone else has already brought that up. But for one thing, especially when it comes to miniature games, whether it's role play and you only need a couple or a war game where you need a lot, I really find having access to a 3D printer is immensely valuable. I I played Battletech and I played Warhammer in the 90s, 2000s, et cetera, up until now. And I remember saving my allowance as a teenager to buy miniatures and buy kits and buy tools and buy paints. And I remember particularly from Games Workshop when the cost started going up and I couldn't just go out and get a miniature anymore. It was, I used to be able to buy a character, a little, pewter or white metal model and go get myself a Space Marine captain for $12 or $10. And I thought that was fine. That was like, okay, good, $10, done. I just need one model, done. It has everything I need. And then that became a plastic model in a multi-part kit, and that was $20 or $25. Okay, my allowance I think was $20 a week. So now I can't necessarily just go do that right off the bat unless I've saved up. Nowadays, a character is like $35, $40, depending on how big and how complex it is, which I think is honestly ripoff, but there it is. You could buy the STL file for $5, maybe $10 if they're bigger. Resin is not much. I mean, obviously, yes, there's the cost of having a 3D printer, but compared to buying those kits and doing all the assembly and everything you need to do that, it's just way simpler and way cheaper. I can't recommend 3D printing enough. There's, disclaimer, safety first, have your protective gear, have your setup, have everything the way you need it. You get where I'm going with that. But the point is, it really does make things a lot easier because you can just go find files. They're very cheap. They're readily available. You can make anything you want within the size of your printer and the resin you have. It's so much easier to crank out armies and miniatures and models and find specific things you want that maybe you can't go do in a brick and mortar store. I love Reaper miniatures. I love the fact they have basically everything has a model somehow, somewhere. But even then, STLs and 3D printing have made that 1,000 times easier. So if one of your friend group has a 3D printer, or you have one of those stores where somebody does 3D printing on request and you just have to get the files, highly recommend you take advantage of that. Okay. Failing models altogether, you have proxying. A lot of people, especially that have played Warhammer, have seen a picture of two guys in the Gulf War in the 90s, literally playing Warhammer with, it's like rocks and soda cans, and they're just imagining, okay, these rocks, these little pebbles here are a group of Space Marines, and this bigger one's a tank, and blah blah blah, and they're just really, kudos to these guys being in a war zone and literally finding a way to game and just using their imagination. You may have to do that and say, okay, well, I don't have this, but I have, a bag full of dollar store army men. That'll work in a pinch, okay? These days, given the availability of printers, you actually have a lot in the way of paper dolls. I don't love them. I don't use them because I have a 3D printer, but I am a patron of One Page Rules. And in addition to 3D print sculpts, they have printable sheets for paper dolling armies in color. So you won't have, a physical 3-dimensional model, but you will have a 2-dimensional full color image of the thing you're playing with to scale, which, okay, it's better than nothing. And everybody has access to glue and cardboard. So it's really not too hard, especially if you want to try something out that's really cheap as chips and easy enough to do. You print it all out, cut it all up, get it all glued together. That's an afternoon, and you're good to go. Put some paper terrain on a table anywhere, and you're good to go. Many companies are starting to roll these out, or something similar that you can find on sites like DriveThruRPG or through their patrons or through Etsy, various places. Just look for paper doll miniature armies and you'll find things. Okay, absolutely. Speaking of online, rules, errata. You can find a lot of things digitally these days. It's getting less and less popular to have physical rule books because typically companies want to update the rules more often than that facilitates. You basically can find whole rule sets, and indie games are becoming more of a thing, so you can really try out anything you want. If there's a specific setting or niche or type of game you want to play, it more than likely exists. Just a question of how well known, how well established, and where can you get it. And you no longer have to physically have a book to do that. You can find stuff digitally all over the internet. A lot of creators have their stuff on their own websites or on a hosting one like Big Geek Emporium, Drive Through RPG, Patreon, what have you. They exist. So it's a lot easier to find. And especially if you're getting someone new in, you can just give them a link. If there's free rules, which there's many games are like freebie these days, actually. Just hand them a link, say, here, read this. Check with them a day later. Hey, did you read those rules? Yeah. Any questions? Yeah. What's blah de blah? Oh, okay. Right here. Let me help you with that. Again, back to the babysitting point. But again, you have your online rules. You have available rule sets, so you don't have to physically share a book around. That can be a nightmare, especially if you're on the younger side. If you're a younger gamer, you don't necessarily have all the scratch. Maybe you have one set of rules to a group of players. Well, that's not really handy or conducive for everyone to learn. I did that. My first copy of Warhammer 40K, I literally chipped in with somebody. 2 other guys, actually. We each paid like $15 to get the old rulebook, and we would share it around. It definitely was not handy, but we did it. We learned it. But it sucked. I don't recommend that, honestly. So that's, I think, a good point to leave off at. I think I've given you enough food for thought here. If you have questions, if you have a specific game or a specific problem you're running into, leave me a comment. I'm definitely one of those guys that likes feedback and likes engaging with my listeners and my viewers and really just going in depth where I need to with them to help you guys get the result you're trying to get, solve a problem that's in front of you. I don't really care. I would like to help. That is the point, and that is why I do this content. So this has been helpful. Please share it around with your friends. If you have a question, feel free to ask me. You can find me on YouTube, Rumble, X, Instagram, Facebook, Podbean. Yeah, just hit me up. I'm very happy to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in again. I am Savage Brewski. I will catch you on the next podcast. Later.